Welcome to Drivemersion, the review show in which we judge a racing game's worth based on factors nobody cares about. Today we've got Need for Speed Heat, the newest, hottest, sexiest vaporwave knockoff by Not Criterion and published by the greatest games publisher the world has ever seen, who has yet to do anything wrong and is constantly forging new paths in the gaming industry. Need for Speed Vaporwave is generally a solid game. It has everything you'd expect from a modern AAA racer, including cars and upgrades and roads. Being a Need for Speed game, it also has a story, which is pretty generic and predictable and derivative of all its predecessors, but serves the purpose of giving the player a reason to race and bully the police. Really, all the story beats are actually pretty reminiscent of a decent action movie. Makes you wonder why they haven't made a Need for Speed movie yet about running from the cops and gaining street cred to partake in racing events of dubious legality for fun and profit. Wait a second. But I'm not here to talk to you about all the crap you already know that has been repeated a million times about the various aspects of the game that excel or fall flat. Today we are focused on one thing, and that's how accurate and realistic the world feels to drive in if you treat it like some role-playing game where you exercise strict trigger discipline and follow all street signs to the letter. To help with this task, we're gonna need a car. Here's my Mercury Cougar, which I will not use because while it was unequivocally the best muscle car of the late 60s through the early 70s with zero competitors of note, it has a fat pre-fuel crisis V8, which means that it chugs gasoline and air like a drug dealer, downing all his stock while the cops are knocking on the door to ask if he knows about Mrs. Eleanor's missing pug that she won't stop calling 911 about. The side effect of this is that the engine, like all of its peers from this era, can't rev higher than a modern diesel engine lest it explode in flames, unlike a modern diesel engine. What this means practically is that you should never drive one of these cars unless you really love to hit limiter, because even fully upgraded with over twice the gears it has stock, the thing only revs to 5k and oh boy does it love going all the way up there and staying there for as long as possible. Given this is a series about being slow and boring and real, we should probably grab a more pedestrian-looking car than this. Need for Speed Esters thankfully has a decent car selection of a bit over 100 with a few duplicates, though if you're used to an infinite choice abyss of something like Forza, this may feel quite lackluster to you. You may also notice a lack of many normal cars, though to be fair, many of these are perfectly normal and pedestrian to anyone who isn't a car nerd, like almost anything Japanese, German, or from the 90s. Because I'm a weeaboo who has no remorse or class, I'm going to take the R32 GTR, given it is the best GTR that was ever made and has yet to be topped by anything that has come since. Being a Japanese car, and one from the 90s at that, the R32 has infinite possibilities to be riced beyond recognition, including swapping its face to look like the objectively inferior R34. However, because we are going for the most mundane look possible, we are going to keep the external appearance essentially stock, which anyone with a brain should do anyway, given that the R32 is the most beautiful and perfectly designed automobile ever invented by man. Now that we have our tastefully basic ride, it's time to get to the actual meat of the show, in which we drive around at comfortable low speeds at low revs and take in the views as if we're cruising around on a Sunday morning with nothing to do but admire the world around us. You will immediately notice that we are in third person just like about every racing game in existence. This is because Need for Speed Temperature Choke has no cockpit view camera, which is an immediate red flag for the show and deducts a significant amount of points from the game's final score, unless you're one of those weirdos who likes to cosplay as a GoPro mounted to the hood of a car, in which case more power to you. The road paint itself is generally pretty detailed and competent, though when you get into the more dense areas like the city, it becomes abundantly clear that this road plan was designed by game developers and not city planners. If you were in the right lane at any given time, you are allowed to only turn right at an intersection, even though you could safely continue forward with no problems because the road still has 2 lanes for the whole run. There's also very bizarre road hookups in places which seem generally hazardous and make no logical sense why any routing like this would be approved outside of city skylines, like this intersection which has no signage or lights and is merely a free-for-all and game of chicken anytime 2 cars encounter each other. Speaking of the AI cars in this game, the diversity of models isn't great but generally good enough, the main detractor being the concerning amount of ambulances constantly roaming the city ready to transport the injured or dying, though I'm not sure if the fact that none ever have their lights or sirens on should make me more or less anxious. As for how the AI cars act, they all seem to take turns whenever possible and never dare follow the speed limit, opting at all times to remain at a steady 37 miles per hour. Furthermore, they all seem quite skittish when they see you approach, as any AI making a turn or crossing the road in your path will slam on the brakes regardless of if they're actually blocking you or not, or your speed, meaning that if an AI is perpendicular to you and in front of you, it will more often than not stop in its tracks to act like a roadblock. If you turn to try and drive around it, it will then continue inching forward until it is blocking you once more, yet again slamming on the brakes and resuming its role as an obstacle. Adding to the natural fear the pedestrian cars have for you includes the fact they absolutely love honking at you as you pass each other in oncoming lanes to one another, as if yelling at you for drifting to their lane like you were about to go and crash into them. This also happens at low speed. The response is entirely based on your direction relative to the given pedestrian. Speaking of AI cars and bizarre driving, there's also police cars that wander around. After all, this is Need for Speed the Fuzz, in which one of the hallmarks is standing up against the man by partaking in dangerous street racing activities for fun and profit. One of the main mechanics of the game is the fact that you can switch between day and night at will, daytime providing race events which are legal and earn you lots of money, while nighttime is where all the illegal rep gaining races are at. Police will actively chase you at night whenever they spot you if you have a wanted level, but they also exist during the day as set dressing even though they generally don't care about anything. The police AI is quite different from normal pedestrian AI because the police AI just don't give a damn. While the pedestrian AI is dead set on lane keeping, being slow and conservative at all times, the police AI practically have racer AI even when they're not chasing anyone. They go way too fast and are almost never fully in their lane as if ready to respond to a crime, not to mention they will sometimes do these e-brake turns as if they just got a call action movie style and need to do a 180 to get to the location as quickly as possible. You'll also find the occasional parked police cruiser which is either just observing or on their lunch break, and if you pull up and honk at them they will sometimes return the favor as if acknowledging their competition that they know they're going to need to beat the crap out of as soon as the sun goes down. Generally, the world of Need for Speed Vice City is modeled on Florida, with Palm City being another video game imitation of Miami, with the swamps near the generic Space Center being a visually appealing recreation of the Everglades. However, on the northern half of the map, it seems the developers realized that Florida was a boring flat swamp hell, and instead of continuing that look, decided to go full Smoky Mountains, with a very hilly forested landscape, which was a perfect excuse to have a bunch of tight, winding switchback togue roads for all those drift weirdos that like to pretend that they're carving the Japanese mountainside and that they have some big-breasted anime housewives waiting for them at home to give them head and cute anime children. I would say that nighttime is where the game really comes alive visually, but that'd be a lie. At best, the game has some bright 80s neon lighting on certain buildings like gas stations or activity markers, but otherwise just looks like, nighttime. Even in most of the city, which you think would be alive with bright pastel colors and neon, there's either nothing but general streetlights or the occasional small strip of interestingly colored light. They didn't even bother to have one particular row of buildings have the full vaporwave neon aesthetic, instead just sparsely adding the effect here and there in a random hodgepodge, probably expecting that all players would just be whizzing through the city at top speed anyway, so why bother? All in all, I'd give Need for Speed Heatwave a Drivemersion rating of 6 out of 10, above average if for no other reason than the fact that the game was fully intended to be sped through with no detail put in for those who stop and smell the roses, but still generally pretty game that anybody can easily cruise in aimlessly for a couple hours.